The wind howled through the lonely human outpost, rattling the thin metal walls like an angry spirit. He sat by the dim lamp, his only company the silence of the cold night. Snowflakes scratched against the window, and the heater groaned as if it too was tired of surviving. The human had grown used to these nights when nothing happened except the sound of his own breath. But then it came, a sound that didn't belong here. 3 heavy knocks on the door. Sharp and desperate, cutting through the storm. His hand froze halfway to the cup of lukewarm tea. Nobody knocked here. Nobody came this far out unless they had a reason, and reasons in this place were rarely good. The knocks came again, louder, faster, like the fist on the other side was trembling with fear. For a moment he thought of ignoring it. He thought maybe it was the wind, maybe just his lonely mind playing tricks. But the third time, the sound shook the frame, and he knew someone was really there. He moved slowly, quietly, reaching for the old pistol under his bed. The safety clicked softly as he loaded it, his eyes never leaving the door. A voice slipped through the metal cracks, soft and broken, not in his tongue, but close enough for him to understand. Please. Open, please. It was female, and terrified. He hesitated, his heart pounding hard against his ribs. This planet had taught him one truth: never trust a voice in the dark. But something in that cry was too human to ignore, too filled with pain. He unbolted the first latch, then the second. The cold slammed into him when the door opened, but the cold wasn't what made him stiffen. There, under the pale moonlight, stood a figure wrapped in torn fabric. Her skin was a strange shade, not fully like the locals he'd seen before, not entirely alien either. Snow clung to her dark hair, and in her trembling arms she clutched a small bundle. A child, wrapped so tightly its tiny face barely peeked out, but the sound of weak, whimpering cries told him it was alive. Her eyes locked with his, wide, pleading, carrying both shame and fear. No home, she whispered, her accent thick, her breath coming in visible clouds. Husband, leave me. Please, help. She tried to bow, but her knees gave way and she collapsed onto the frozen step, holding the child up even as her own body shook violently. The human dropped his gun to the floor. Instinct pulled him forward before thought could stop him. He caught her by the shoulders, surprised by how light she was, how her bones felt like twigs under the skin. Her lips were turning blue. The child's cries were fading, weaker by the second. Inside, the heater worked hard to push away the cold, but it was not enough for bodies so close to freezing. He dragged her inside, shutting the door fast against the storm. She slumped against the wall, still holding the child with shaking arms. The bundle trembled with tiny, fragile life. He tore an old blanket from his bed, wrapping it around both mother and child. Her eyes followed his every move, mistrust flickering there even while her voice begged softly, "Don't send me back. He will kill me." He poured hot water into a cup, pressing it into her hands. She tried to hold it, but her fingers were stiff and numb. He had to guide the cup to her lips, tilting it so she could drink. Steam curled around her face, thawing her frozen features. Her eyes glistened with tears, not just from the heat, but from the weight of being alive for another minute. The child stirred weakly under the blankets, and she leaned close, whispering something in her native tongue. A lullaby, maybe, or a promise. The human watched her closely, torn between caution and compassion. He had heard stories of traps, desperate women used as bait to lower a man's guard before raiders came. But this was different. No act could fake the frostbite on her hands, the cracked lips, the way her body shook against the blanket. She was real. Her suffering was real, and the danger around her was the kind of danger no one would invite willingly. He knew he should stay distant. He knew letting her stay could mean trouble. Yet as he looked at the tiny bundle and the fading cries, something inside him hardened. He would not watch a child die on his floor. "Stay by the fire," he said finally, his voice steady but rough. She flinched as if the words were too kind for her to believe. Slowly, she nodded, clutching her child tighter. The flames painted her face in gold and shadow, and for a second he saw not an alien, not a stranger, but a woman who had been abandoned at the edge of the world. The night dragged on with the storm pounding outside, but inside his small outpost, a new storm was just beginning. Every glance she gave him carried fear mixed with fragile hope. Every cry from the child reminded him of the weight of what he had chosen. He didn't know her story, not yet. He didn't know why her husband had left her, why she had come to his door instead of anyone else's. But he knew this much. He had opened the door, and now nothing would ever be the same. The last thing he saw before sleep, pressed heavy on his eyes, was her sitting close to the fire, whispering to the child, her body curled tight as if she expected to be thrown out at any moment. And the last sound he heard was not the storm, but the fragile knock still echoing in his memory, the knock that had brought her to his door and changed everything. The fire had burned low, but its faint glow still pushed the shadows away. He sat across from her, the pistol resting within reach, though his hand stayed off it now. She sat on the floor, wrapped in the blanket he had given, the child resting against her chest. For a long time she said nothing, only staring into the flames as if afraid they would die out. Finally, her lips parted. Her voice was quiet, heavy, as though each word cost her strength. "You want to know why I am here?" He didn't answer at first. He only nodded, slow, careful, giving her space. She looked down at the child and brushed a finger over its small cheek, her hands trembling not from cold, but from the memory inside her. "My husband," she whispered, the word bitter, sharp. "He is proud man, proud of blood, proud of caste. His people, they think they are high, pure, too high for me." She swallowed hard, her throat tightening. "I was not his choice. I was gift, trade, something to make peace between clans. He did not love me. He never tried." The human leaned forward slightly. He could hear the pain, but he also heard something else, a wound deeper than a single cruel man. He didn't push her, but she kept speaking, as if the silence of this small room had finally given her permission to let it out. "I tried. I tried to be good wife. I cooked, I worked, I obeyed. He looked at me like shadow, like tool. Still I thought, maybe when child come, he will see me different. Maybe he will see me as mother of his blood." Her arms tightened around the bundle, as if to protect it from even the memory. But when child born, he saw face, saw eyes. Not same as his, small sign, small difference, but for him, it was everything. He said I carried dirty heritage. He called me impure, cursed, not worthy of his name. He shouted that I betray him, though I never touched another. She paused, tears rolling down her cheeks, her voice cracking. He say I shame his line. He say I bring filth into his blood. And then he left me. Left me with baby, left me outside in cold. He told me if I come back, he'd kill us both. The human's chest tightened. He had seen cruelty before, seen war and hunger, but something about this woman's quiet suffering cut deeper. He wanted to ask questions. What did dirty heritage mean? Why was her child different? But the answers could wait. Right now, what mattered was the shaking figure before him, clutching her baby as if it was the only piece of her life that still had meaning. She looked up, her eyes red but burning. "I walked for hours. I knock on doors. No one open. They spit. They call me cursed. Only your house left. I thought, maybe you shoot me. Maybe you chase me. But I knock anyway. Because if I not try, my baby die tonight." Her voice broke again, a sound so raw it silenced even the storm outside. She pressed her face against the child's tiny head, rocking slowly. The baby whimpered softly, too weak to cry loud. She kissed its forehead, her tears wetting its skin. He is innocent. He did nothing. Why must he suffer? The human swallowed hard. He felt something rising inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. It was anger, yes, but it was also protectiveness. He had lived alone so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to want to shield another life. His voice was rough when he finally spoke. "You're safe here. He won't touch you. Neither will anyone else." Her eyes widened, as if she couldn't believe his words. She shook her head, almost laughing through her tears. "Safe? No. No place safe. His clan will come. They will search. They will not stop until they find me, until they kill baby." Her words were soft, but they carried the weight of certainty. The fear in her tone was not just fear of her husband. It was fear of a whole people who believed the same as him. The human leaned back, staring at the small window where the storm still raged outside. He understood now why her knock had sounded so desperate, why her body trembled not only from cold, but from despair. She wasn't running from one man. She was running from a belief older and harsher than she could fight alone. He looked at the pistol on the table, then back at her. If they came, he knew it would not be easy. But for the first time in years, he felt he had something worth fighting for. Her voice drew him back. Do you know what it means? Dirty heritage? She asked quietly. He shook his head. She looked down at her child again, stroking the tiny hands. It means mixed blood. Somewhere, long ago, maybe human touched my line, maybe other race. My blood not pure. They say it is poison. They say it spreads weakness. But I do not see weakness. I see my son. I see life. I see hope. Yet they see shame. Her voice hardened like steel under her sorrow. I will not let them take him. Even if I die, I will not let them. The human felt a chill, not from the cold, but from the weight of her words. He could see it in her eyes. She was ready to give everything for that child, even if it meant her own end. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Only the fire crackled, the wind screamed outside, and the baby gave a soft, fragile sigh. Slowly he stood, moving closer to the fire, throwing another piece of wood into the flames. The light grew stronger, the warmth spreading a little more. He looked at her, really looked, and saw not just an abandoned wife, but a woman carrying the scars of a cruel world. Then we fight, he said simply. His voice was calm, but inside, his heart hammered with the promise he had just made. She stared at him, as if she wanted to argue, as if she thought he was mad. But then something softened in her expression. Maybe for the first time since her husband cast her out, she allowed herself to believe she wasn't completely alone. The storm outside raged on, but inside the small outpost, 2 broken lives and 1 fragile child sat close to the fire, tied together now by a story too cruel to forget, and a promise too strong to break. The storm outside grew louder as night deepened, the wind shaking the walls of the small outpost. The firelight flickered across the room, throwing long shadows on the walls. He had given her and the child food, a little broth he had kept from earlier. And now the only sound was the soft slurping of the child as it tried to drink from the spoon she held. The human sat on the edge of his narrow bed, cleaning his old pistol, but his eyes kept drifting toward her. She sat on the floor still, back pressed against the wall, as if too afraid to claim any space as her own. When the child finally fell asleep, her shoulders relaxed slightly, but her eyes still flickered nervously around the room. He noticed how stiff she was, how she avoided his gaze. "You should rest," he said after a long silence. His voice was calm, but she startled anyway, clutching the child closer as though his words might hide a threat. "The bed's big enough. You and the little one can sleep here. I'll take the chair." Her lips pressed into a thin line, her pride and fear twisting together. "No," she whispered quickly. "I will not take your bed. I will stay here. Floor is fine." Her tone was defensive, almost stubborn, but the tremble in her arms betrayed her exhaustion. He could see she was barely holding herself upright. He leaned back, sighing. "The floor is cold. You'll freeze. The boy will freeze. You need the bed." He motioned toward it, but she shook her head again, her hair falling into her eyes. "No," she said, her voice low. "If I sleep in bed with you, it is wrong. My people say it is shame. I already shame. I cannot more." Her eyes dropped to the child's face, and her words grew softer, as if speaking to herself. "I am not wife anymore. I am nothing." The human stared at her for a long moment. He could feel the weight of her shame pressing the air between them. She wasn't just afraid of him. She was afraid of herself, of the laws and beliefs she carried inside like chains. He rubbed his jaw, unsure of how to answer. He wasn't looking for a wife, wasn't looking for company. He was a man used to silence. Yet now, with her trembling in the corner, he felt something twist inside him. The baby stirred suddenly, letting out a thin cry. The sound cut through the room like a blade, high-pitched and desperate. The alien woman rocked him quickly, half whispering something in her tongue. But the child's cries grew louder, sharper, the voice of need and cold and hunger. Her eyes darted to the fire, then to the bed, and he saw the battle in her face. She wanted to stay firm, to hold her pride, but her child's wailing broke down the wall she had built. The human stood and walked slowly to the bed. He pulled back the rough blanket, exposing the thin mattress. "Bring him here," he said firmly. "It's warm enough if you both lie down. He won't survive the cold floor." Her lips trembled. She opened her mouth to argue, but another sharp cry from the child silenced her. Slowly, reluctantly, she rose from the floor, clutching the bundle tight. Each step she took toward the bed looked like a battle she was losing. She laid the child down first, her body still hovering protectively, as though he might reach out to harm. Then, after a long pause, she lowered herself onto the mattress, her body stiff, her eyes never leaving him. "I'll take the chair," he repeated, sitting down heavily on the wooden seat by the wall. He pulled his coat around his shoulders, settling in as best he could. The bed creaked softly as she adjusted, curling herself around the baby, her back turned toward him. The firelight lit the curve of her shoulders, the rise and fall of her breath. For a while, the only sounds were the storm outside and the quiet fussing of the child, until finally it stilled, comforted by the warmth of its mother's body. Minutes stretched into hours. He thought she had fallen asleep until he heard her whisper, barely audible over the wind. "Why? Why you help me?" Her voice carried suspicion, confusion, as though kindness itself was something foreign. He looked at the fire before answering. "Because no one else would. Because you knocked." His words were simple, but they carried a weight she seemed not ready to accept. She didn't reply. Instead, she tightened her hold on the child and closed her eyes. He leaned his head back against the wall, staring at the ceiling. He knew this was only the beginning of trouble. The whispers of shame she carried, the pride of her husband's clan, the strange mark of dirty heritage in her blood, all of it would bring danger to his quiet outpost. Yet as he listened to the quiet breathing from the bed, he also knew he couldn't turn them away. The night dragged slowly, the storm raging on, but inside, something fragile began to form. Not trust, not yet, but necessity, a shared need for survival. She had taken his bed not by choice, but by desperation. And he, for the first time in many years, had chosen to give. It was a small thing, a bed shared under a storm's roar, but in that small thing, the shape of something greater was already being born. She lay awake longer than he realized, her eyes half open, watching him through the flicker of the fire. She saw him sitting with his coat pulled tight, his face turned toward the door, as if guarding against threats only he could see. And though fear still burned in her chest, she felt another spark there too, one she had almost forgotten existed. A spark of safety, faint and fragile, but real. By the time sleep finally claimed her, the child's tiny hand resting against her neck, she no longer trembled quite as much. And though she did not know it yet, the step she had taken onto his bed was the first step into a new life that neither storm, nor shame, nor angry husband could erase. Morning came slow, the light of the weak sun slipping through the frost on the window. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside covered in heavy snow. The human stretched his stiff body after a long night on the chair, his neck sore and his eyes heavy. He turned his head and saw her still curled on his bed, the child pressed close to her chest. Her face, half hidden in the blanket, looked softer in sleep, no longer carrying the weight of fear. For a moment, the room felt peaceful, but peace in this land never lasted long. He stepped outside to gather firewood, his boots crunching in the snow. The cold air burned his lungs, but he was used to it. What he was not used to was the sight of shadows moving at the edge of the nearby settlement. He caught the gaze of two aliens wrapped in heavy cloaks, their eyes fixed on him longer than simple curiosity. They turned quickly, whispering to each other, before disappearing down the road. A chill that had nothing to do with the weather crept up his spine. By the time he returned, she was awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with her child still sleeping. Her eyes darted to him nervously, then to the bundle of wood in his arms. "They saw me?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. He frowned. "Who?" She looked toward the window, her lips pressing tight. "My husband's people. They watch everything. They will know soon." He placed the wood down, jaw tightening. "Let them watch. They'll find no weakness here." But his words didn't calm her. She hugged the child tighter, rocking slightly as though already hearing the distant voices of her clan. By midday, the whispers had begun. A pair of merchants passed by his outpost, glancing at his door longer than usual. He heard their murmurs carried by the wind, words in the alien tongue he only partly understood, but the tone was clear. Mockery, disgust, warning. Later, when he went to fetch water from the frozen stream, an old villager met him there. The alien's wrinkled face twisted with contempt. "You took her in," he spat. "The dirty wife. She will curse your home. Send her away before it is too late." The human's grip tightened on the bucket, his knuckles white. He said nothing, only filled the water and walked back. But inside, anger churned. These people would leave her to die, leave a child to freeze, all for pride and blood. He had seen cruelty before, but this This was cowardice dressed as honor. When he entered, she was by the fire, humming softly to the baby. She looked up at his expression and already knew. "They will not stop," she whispered. "They will come. They will call me traitor, curse, bring shame on them, and you." Her voice broke. "You will be target too." He sat down heavily, rubbing his forehead. "Let them come. I won't hand you over." Her eyes widened, glistening with tears. "You don't understand. They will not just come with words. They will come with blades, with fire. They will not forgive you for keeping me." She stood, pacing with restless steps, her fear spilling from every movement. "Already they whisper. Already they spit. Tomorrow they may burn this house. They may kill you. Why? Why would you risk that for me?" He looked at her, really looked, at the scars of fear etched into her face. He could have told her the truth, that he didn't know why, that he was tired of watching the strong crush the weak, that something in him refused to let a child die for the sake of tradition. Instead, he said simply, "Because it's the right thing." The words silenced her. She stared at him, searching his face, as though trying to find the trick hidden inside. But she found none. Slowly, her breathing calmed, though the fear never fully left her eyes. As night fell again, the tension outside grew heavier. He saw more figures near the edges of the settlement, moving like wolves circling prey. Voices carried through the cold air, low, sharp, angry. He caught words he understood. Shame. Filth. Human. He kept his pistol close, his hand brushing against it each time the door rattled with the wind. Inside, she sat close to the fire, her body drawn small, as if she could vanish into the shadows. The child whimpered now and then, and each sound made her flinch. She whispered, almost to herself, "They will take him from me. They will not let him live." The human walked over, crouching in front of her. "No one is taking him," he said firmly. His voice was like iron, steady and final. "Not while I breathe." Her lips trembled. She wanted to believe, but the years of cruelty chained her hope. She only nodded weakly, clutching the baby tighter. The wind outside carried laughter then, cruel and mocking, voices of young men who had gathered to taunt. They shouted words in their tongue, words filled with hate. She buried her face into the child's blanket, trembling. He stepped to the door, opening it enough to stare out. 4 figures stood in the snow, smirking, pointing toward his home. One spat on the ground, then all of them walked away slowly, their meaning clear. This was only the beginning. When he closed the door, she was staring at him with wide, terrified eyes. "It has started," she whispered. "They will come for me soon. You should send me away before it is too late." He shook his head, his voice calm but hard. "No, you knocked on my door. You stay. They'll have to go through me." For a long time, silence filled the room, broken only by the crackle of fire. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not only tears of fear. There was something else, something almost like hope. She lowered her head, rocking her child, her whisper soft as a breath. "No one ever spoke for me before." And though danger thickened outside, in that small moment by the fire, something unspoken passed between them. He was no longer just the stranger who opened his door. He was the shield she had never thought she would find. The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the sound of the fire crackling in the hearth. He sat near the table, cleaning the pistol piece by piece, while she sat close to the flames, with her child pressed tightly against her chest. Her eyes kept drifting to the window as if expecting a shadow to appear at any moment. The whispers in the village, the laughter outside, the spit on the ground, it was all a sign that danger was coming. Still, he had chosen. He would not send her away. Hours passed before she finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, almost carried away by the fire's crackle. "You do not know why they hate me so much," she whispered. Her fingers gently stroked the child's cheek, her face tight with both love and sorrow. "It is not only because I was abandoned. It is because of what runs in my blood, and in his." He looked up, his hands pausing on the pistol. He had wondered many times since she knocked on his door. He had heard words like dirty heritage and impure blood, but the meaning had always been cloudy, hidden by her fear. Now he listened closely. "My people," she began slowly, "believe in purity. They believe that only their kind should carry their blood. Long ago, some lines mixed, some with humans, some with others. Those like me are marked. Even if it is many generations ago, the mark stays." She lowered her head. "When my son was born, the mark was clear. His eyes, They are too human. His skin has shade not like theirs. My husband saw it, and in his rage he called me traitor. He said I poisoned his name, but it was not me. It was the blood already inside me. Blood I did not choose. Her voice cracked and she hugged the child closer. They will never allow him to live. They believe children like him weaken the clan. They will kill him to erase the shame. And me too, because I carried him. The human's chest tightened. He had seen prejudice before, in wars where soldiers slaughtered villages just because they were different, weaker, unwanted. But to kill a child for the shade of his skin or the shape of his eyes, that was something darker. He leaned forward, his voice low but firm. They won't touch him. They won't touch you. Not while you're here. She looked at him, her eyes shining with tears. You say this because you are strong, but you are only one man. They are many. They have blades, fire, numbers. They will not stop. Her voice trembled, and then it hardened. Do not risk your life for me. I am not worth it. Only he is worth saving. She lifted the baby slightly, her hands trembling. Promise me if they come, you will save him. Even if I fall, even if you must leave me. The human shook his head slowly. No, I don't make promises like that. If I fight for both of you. His eyes were steady like iron. You are worth saving. Don't let them convince you otherwise. This for a long moment she stared at him, her lips trembling as if she wanted to argue, but the words caught in her throat. She lowered her gaze, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. No one had ever said those words to her before. Not her husband, not her clan, not anyone. She had always been told she was less, broken, shameful. Now here was a human, a stranger, saying the opposite. It shook something deep inside her. The child stirred, letting out a soft cry. She hushed him, but the sound made her chest ache with fear. He is special, she whispered. Even now, I see things in him. His eyes, when he looks at me, they are too sharp, too knowing. Sometimes when I sing, his breath changes, like he understands. My husband saw it too. That is why he grew more afraid. Not only human blood, but something stronger. Something they fear. The human frowned. Fear? Of a baby? They fear what he could become, she answered, her voice heavy. They fear that mixed blood may hold power greater than pure blood. They fear it will prove their laws are lies, and that is why they will kill him before he grows. She pressed her lips to her son's forehead, her tears falling into his soft hair. But I will not let them. I will run until my legs break. I will fight until I have no breath. He must live, even if I do not. The human watched her, the firelight painting her face in gold and shadow. He saw not weakness but strength. Strength born of desperation, of love so fierce it defied death itself. He leaned forward, his hand resting on the table, his voice steady and final. Then you won't fight alone. If they want him, they'll have to take him from me too. And I promise you, they won't. Her eyes met his, wide and searching. For a long moment, neither of them looked away. The fire crackled louder, filling the silence. Finally, her lips curved into the faintest, most fragile of smiles. It was not happiness, not yet. But it was hope, and that was something she had not felt in a very long time. Outside, the snow lay quiet under the pale moon, but danger was already moving. In the village, whispers spread like fire on dry grass. The abandoned wife was alive. She was living under a human's roof. And worse, she carried the cursed child in her arms. Rumors twisted into threats, and threats grew into plans. The clan was stirring, and soon they would come. Inside, the human loaded his pistol again, setting it close by. She lay by the fire with her child, whispering soft words of comfort, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. Yet for the first time since her exile, her heart beat with something more than fear. She was not alone anymore. And though the storm outside was quiet now, both of them knew a greater storm was on its way. The night was still, the air heavy with tension, as if the walls themselves knew danger was near. The human sat by the door, his pistol resting in his lap, eyes sharp and restless. The woman had fallen into uneasy sleep near the fire, her child pressed tightly against her chest. Her face twitched now and then, as if even her dreams carried the weight of fear. He could not sleep. He knew it was only a matter of time before the whispers outside turned into footsteps, and footsteps into blood. It happened just before dawn. A crunch of snow, too heavy for the wind, too steady to be accident. His grip tightened on the pistol. Through the crack of the window, he saw dark figures moving against the pale glow of morning. Shadows, cloaked and armed, their movements careful but sure. His heart beat faster, but his mind grew calmer, sharper, like it always did before a fight. He stood silently, stepping close to the bed. "Wake up," he whispered. She stirred, her eyes opening in confusion, then widening when she saw the look on his face. "They're here." Her body stiffened, her arms holding the child tighter. "No," she whispered, almost a plea, but the sound outside confirmed his words. A low voice barked something in the alien tongue, followed by the scrape of metal. Then came the knock, not desperate this time, but hard and commanding, shaking the wood. Another voice, louder, cold. "Give her to us! The cursed wife does not belong here. Hand her over, and we leave you in peace." She began to tremble, her lips moving soundlessly. He placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Stay with the boy. Do not move." She wanted to argue, wanted to beg him not to open the door, but no words came. She only nodded, her eyes wide with terror. He stepped forward and unlatched the door, opening it just enough to face the crowd outside. There were 6 of them, maybe more in the shadows beyond. Their leader stood tall, broad shoulders wrapped in heavy furs, his blade gleaming even in the weak light. His face was twisted with hate. And yet, when the woman gasped behind him, the man's eyes flickered. He was no stranger. He was her husband. "You shame me further," the husband spat, his voice like venom. "First you poison my line with filth, now you hide behind a human? You crawl in his bed like an animal?" His eyes burned with rage. "Give her to me. I will cleanse my name tonight." The human's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "She knocked on my door. She stays. You want her. You'll have to take her through me." The husband laughed, though there was no humor in it. "You are one man. We are many. Do not die for something worthless. She is nothing. The child is nothing. Step aside." The human raised his pistol slowly, the iron gleaming. "Then step forward and see what one man can do." The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the wind. The men shifted, uneasy, their eyes flicking between the pistol and their leader. None of them had faced human weapons before. They had heard stories of the fire that burst from these small machines, the way they tore through flesh like paper. Still, pride and anger drove the husband forward. Inside, the woman pressed her hand over her child's mouth to silence his soft whimper. Tears filled her eyes as she watched from the shadows. Her husband's voice, the same voice that had cursed her, now demanded her life again. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body was frozen. The only sound in her ears was the hammering of her heart. The husband snarled, "You will regret this, human. She is not worth your blood." He raised his hand, giving the signal. The men behind him spread out, circling the small outpost. Their blades glinted in the pale light, their eyes filled with cruelty. The human took one step outside, his pistol steady, his eyes never leaving the husband's. "Come then," he said softly, but his words cut like steel. The first man lunged from the side, a flash of steel in his hand. The pistol roared, a deafening crack that echoed across the snow. The man dropped instantly, his body crumpling into the white ground, the snow around him blooming red. The others froze, shock gripping them. They had heard the stories. Now they had seen the truth. The husband's face twisted with fury. "Kill him!" He screamed. 2 more rushed forward, their boots kicking up snow, but the pistol fired again, then again. One fell, clutching his chest. The other stumbled back, blood staining his cloak. The air filled with the smell of smoke and iron. Inside, the woman held her child close, whispering prayers through trembling lips. She could hear the gunfire, the screams, the clash of men dying. Every shot felt like a hammer to her heart, each one carrying the weight of his promise that they would have to go through him first. The fight raged in bursts, short and brutal. The human moved with calm precision, each step measured, each shot placed. But the husband was relentless. He shouted commands, his men pushing forward despite fear. The human's pistol clicked empty, the chamber dry. Without hesitation, he drew his knife, ready for the close fight. The husband saw his chance. He charged, blade raised high, eyes burning with hatred. Their weapons clashed, steel against steel, the sound sharp in the frozen air. The struggle was fierce, the husband's strength against the human's grit. He pushed, snarled, spat curses, but the human did not yield. Inside the outpost, she stood, unable to stay hidden any longer. Through the crack of the door, she saw them locked in battle, her heart twisting. The child whimpered, and she pressed a kiss to his forehead. "Hold on, little one," she whispered. "Hold on." The fight outside grew harsher. Blood stained the snow, the grunts of pain mixing with the howl of the wind. The human's arm burned from a cut, but his knife pressed closer, closer, until finally the husband stumbled back, rage turning to disbelief. The human stood tall, chest heaving, blood dripping, but his eyes were steady as stone. The husband spat, clutching his wound. "She will ruin you," he hissed. "That woman will bring you nothing but death." Then, with one last glare, he retreated into the shadows, his surviving men dragging the wounded away. Silence fell, broken only by the sound of his heavy breathing and the crackle of the fire inside. He stepped back into the outpost, his clothes stained with blood, his face pale but unbroken. She stared at him, tears streaming down her cheeks, the child held tight. "You fought them," she whispered, disbelief and awe mixing in her voice. "You fought them for me." He dropped into the chair, exhausted, the pistol heavy in his hand. His voice was low, but it carried the weight of truth. "I told you, they'll have to go through me first." She knelt beside him, her hand trembling as it reached for his arm. For the first time since she had been abandoned, she felt something stronger than fear. She felt protected. And in that moment, she knew he was no longer just the man who opened his door. He was the man who stood against death itself to keep her alive. The fire burned low, its glow soft against the dark walls of the outpost. Smoke hung faint in the air, mixing with the sharp scent of blood and iron. He sat slumped in the chair, his shirt torn, his arm wrapped in a strip of cloth that already showed patches of red. His breathing was steady, but every rise of his chest carried pain. The woman knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she pressed another cloth against his wound. Her child slept in the bed, unaware of the storm that had just passed. She worked in silence, her eyes filled with worry. At times, she glanced at his face, expecting him to push her hand away, but he didn't. He only let her tend to him, his jaw tight but his eyes calm. She had never seen a man fight like he did, alone against many, refusing to give her up even when her own people demanded it. Every strike of his blade, every roar of his weapon had been for her. The thought made her chest ache in ways she couldn't name. "You should have let me go," she whispered finally, her voice breaking the silence. Her eyes dropped to the floor. "You almost died tonight. They will come again. You should not carry my curse." He turned his head slowly, his gaze steady on her. His voice was rough, tired, but firm. "You are not a curse. Stop saying that." Her lips parted, but no words came. He said it with such certainty that for a moment, she almost believed him. She bowed her head, blinking away tears. "No one has ever spoken for me before. No one has ever stood beside me. I was always alone. Even when I was wife, I was shadow. Tonight, you—" She stopped, her throat tightening. "Tonight, you gave me back my life." The human leaned back in the chair, exhaling. "Then keep it. Keep living. That's all I want." Her hands froze over his arm, her heart twisting. She wanted to thank him, to say more, but the words felt too small for what he had done. Instead, she rose slowly and moved to the fire, feeding it another piece of wood. The flames grew brighter, painting the room in warm light. She returned to the bed, laying her child gently down. For a long while, she just stood there, watching the tiny rise and fall of his chest. Then she turned back toward the human, her eyes softer, her steps quiet. "You cannot sleep in the chair," she said, her voice low but steady. "You are wounded. You need rest." He gave a faint shrug, wincing from the pain. "I'll be fine. The chair is enough." Her eyes narrowed. For the first time since she had come to his door, her voice carried strength, not fear. "No, you fought for me. You bled for me. You will not sleep in chair like some stranger. The bed is wide. You will rest there." He opened his mouth to protest, but the firmness in her tone silenced him. She walked to him, gently pulling his good arm until he rose, groaning as he did. She guided him to the bed, her hands steady against his back. He sat down heavily, the warmth of the mattress pulling him in. She pulled the blanket over him, her touch careful, almost tender. When she stepped back, intending to take the chair herself, he caught her wrist lightly. "You'll freeze out there," he said, his voice softer now. "Stay. For the boy." Her breath caught. For a moment, she hesitated, fear and shame warring inside her. But then she looked at her child sleeping between them, his small face peaceful for the first time in days. She slowly nodded, lying down on the other side of the bed. She curled around the child, her back to him, her body tense at first. The room grew quiet, The only sounds the fire's crackle and their steady breaths. Time passed, and her body began to relax. She could feel the heat of him behind her, the steady presence that made her heart both calm and restless. For years, she had been called worthless, dirty, nothing. Tonight, lying in his bed, she felt something she had never known. Safety. The child stirred in his sleep, a soft whimper escaping his lips. She hushed him, but the sound carried across the bed. Without thinking, the human reached out, resting his hand gently on the child's back. The touch was careful, protective, not claiming but steady. The boy quieted instantly, his tiny breaths evening out. She turned her head slightly, her eyes meeting his in the dim firelight. Neither spoke. Words were too heavy for what passed between them in that moment. She whispered finally, her voice trembling. "No one ever fought for me before. No one ever cared if I lived or died. But you fought like I was worth everything." Her eyes glistened with tears. "I don't know why, but I will never forget." He held her gaze, his voice low but certain. "You are worth everything. Don't let them take that from you again." Her breath shuddered. She lowered her head, her tears falling silently onto the blanket. But for the first time, they were not only tears of fear. They were tears of release, of walls breaking. She shifted slightly, her body inching closer, until the warmth of his shoulder brushed hers. She closed her eyes, whispering one last time before sleep took her. "Thank you for giving me back a place to belong." The fire burned slow through the night, shadows dancing on the walls. Outside, the snow lay heavy and silent, covering the blood, covering the tracks of men who had come to kill. The clan would not stop. They would come again, stronger, angrier. But for now, in that small room, there was peace. He lay awake a little longer, watching her sleep beside the child. His body ached, his wounds burned, but his heart felt steady. He had opened the door once, and it had changed everything. Now, lying in the same bed, sharing warmth not from shame but from choice, he knew the fight was no longer just his. They were tied together now, human, woman, and child. The storm outside would return, but tonight, in the quiet glow of the fire, they had found something stronger than fear. Something no blade could cut, no clan could erase. A beginning.